This week on Rockstar Superhero.
Were you with her when the silence came from overhead? Considering the message lay upon the mantelhead. You wanna run back to know what you were.
I fell in love with Oliver Chang's music when I heard the dreamiest sounds around via an emotionally charged sonic masterpiece, Open Season, a song that was written in collaboration with Jack Milas, his partner in the Australian superduo Hi Hi's. Oliver's music has evolved tremendously over the years, weaving in and out of the dream pop space into dance, techno, house, industrial, and ultimately some of the most lovely, vibey music around. His current projects, Animal Feelings, Fancy Feelings, and Jungle Feelings, yes, there are 3 different feeling projects, are wildly different, and yet all of these projects have found a way to converge back on the strengths of his songwriting and approach to melody. I'm so grateful that Oliver not only gave me the opportunity to speak to him and to share his thoughts with you, but that he's become my friend over the last 5 years. He's a truly amazing and special human who loves our planet and has great hopes for the world and all the species that live within it. This is my interview with the impeccable songwriter Oliver Chang on the Rockstar Superhero Podcast.
Lay down, lay in the moon, lay till it's over.
We'll just jump right into it because
Yeah,
I could
let's
sit
do
here
it.
and praise you all day. You're one of my favorite musicians.
Oh,
you
wow.
you create the dreamiest, most lovely music, Oliver. It's
Thanks,
it's
Rob.
you're welcome. It's beyond measure. It really is one of the most intimate and intricate things I've ever heard in my life. And I will tell you that
Mm.
every time I hear a piece of your work, whether it's the ethereal music, the film scoring, the dance music, they literally make me tear up, and I'm not
Oh, wow.
exaggerating.
Oh,
But
wow. Thanks, man.
yeah,
That's really nice. That's really nice to hear. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, good. It's lovely, and I will tell you that of all my friends, and I have a great many who are
Mm.
into heavy metal,
Mm.
and they think your work is impeccable as well. So there's something,
Ah.
yeah,
Mm.
there's something that translates. It steps across the border.
No, that's really nice to hear. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because I mean it's really hard to not like um piano music if it's kind of not too sickly, because it's just such a beautiful instrument. It's such a, I know, all sounds are, are open for are options when creating music, but the piano in particular is so it's such a complex instrument when it comes to harmonic resonance, like in sympathetic harmonies, like with this large cavity with so many strings, and it's such a rich sound. Like even just one note sounds so beautiful. So 2 notes sound great, 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes. It all sounds good if they're placed thoughtfully together. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's something about the complexity, especially in a dissonant piece, something where there's 11ths and 13ths, where
Yeah, yeah,
there's a
sure.
lot of harmonic clash
Yeah, yeah,
that
sure.
sort of speaks almost to like the energy in your body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's also like because real pianos are rarely perfectly in tune, um, I really like the idea of never doubling notes. So like, in the left hand and the right hand, if the melody should never repeat itself. I mean the notes in the right hand should never double up onto the notes in the left hand, because the problem with the even slightly out of tune piano is that kind of that tips the scales unevenly towards those frequencies and that note, and can become like a bit jarring in a not nice way. Because if you have a piano that's slightly out of tune, you already have like very subtle dissonance happening.
Right.
So I like
Right.
writing pieces of music that like, I guess, extremely democratic in terms of what notes they're using. They're never doubling up on the same note, like, you know. So you know, it's sort of like yeah, so that the chances of the natural dissonance in the in the out of tune strings don't get a chance to become janky sounding. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense because
Mm.
when there's unison vocals, for example, there's
Mm.
always a sort of a dissonant interplay that happens, and it's rare that they work well together. Certain voices just don't work,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's almost like body types that don't accept certain
Yeah.
colognes. It
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Sure.
clashes with right.
It's true. Yeah. Exactly the same. Exactly. Yeah. There's some things that don't gel, and you know, and it's just like, I mean, it's a very, like, I guess it's just, you know, it's just physics, you know, like if you double up on the same note, that note's going to be louder, and you know, you don't necessarily want it to be louder, especially if it's a bit out of tune, because then it just exaggerates the ugliness of the sound. Yeah.
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 You
Yeah.
know, I've been listening to your music for about 10 years now.
Oh, wow.
And the thing that I've found is a constant across what you seem to write. And I am making some assumptions here because I'm bringing some high highs music into this as
Of
well.
course. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but there seems to be a playfulness and a bittersweet aspect to what you write and how you create. And I'm curious if that comes somehow from where you grew up, how your childhood, how you were formed,
Mm.
because it's like your music has a thumbprint that is very, very clearly Oliver Chang. Now, granted,
Mm.
I'm a
Mm.
musician myself, so
Mm.
I'm listening, and maybe
Mm.
not all listeners are really listening for the complexities, but I
Mm.
hear the
Mm.
voicing in between, and
Mm.
I know that comes off a little whatever foofy, but the reality
No.
is your music has your identity in it. How did
Mm.
that get created?
Huh, that's a really good question. Well, to the first part of your question, the playfulness of how I try to approach everything, is kind of like, you know, that there's, you know, I kind of feel like, you know, the 80s, the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, there was such a, like, a boom of, like, you know, oh, let's get rich with music. Let's write a hit song and make
Right.
lots of money. And there was this whole kind of mindset around, you know, commerce and music, and this whole kind of like pressure that people would put on themselves around creating music. And yeah, I feel like a lot of people forgot, and you know, and still have forgot, especially if you're, you know, you know, kind of halfway through developing as a musician. You kind of, you know, you're thinking about, you, not always, but you're thinking about, you know, a lot of right brain things, you know, like, oh, is this good? Is this catchy? Is this, are people going to like this? You know, these sorts of questions, and that kind of enters the creative process. But I think it's a really good kind of approach if you can just do what it is necessary to let go of those kinds of questions, and really try and focus on music, on the playfulness of music. Like, it's called playing music, right?
Right.
You play music, you listen to music, and you play music, and that's, you know, that's really important. It's play. It's not like asset creation, or, you know, like hit songwriting, or like, you know, money making. Or, you know, like a popularity contest, or, you know, like a fashion show. It's a, you know, you're playing like you're a kid, and that's how it should be. And that's where I think the best stuff comes from, right? So that's the playfulness. And then the other side of I guess the identity in music, I think it's like, I mean, it's everyone's, you know, sort of goal. I mean, it's not necessarily everyone's goal, but you know, so much music has been made. It's very, very, very hard to kind of sound original and have an inbuilt identity into you know, a musical language. But I think that's what it is. It's a language with accents and words, and I do sort of spend a lot of my time when I'm practicing or writing thinking about that and trying to create a vocabulary and, you know, like very clear cut nuts and bolts kind of um, sort of identity traits within how I write music. So whether that's, you know, like, you know, the kinds of chords or the kinds of figures that I use or the kinds of you know, arpeggiated patterns or the kinds of melodies, and also the kinds of stories that you're trying to tell, the kind of emotion that you're trying to convey, you know, does need to be quite specific if you want to build a exclusive language, not an exclusive, but like you know, a specific language that is unique to your own self. Like you have to think about, you know, like, okay, what makes, you know, for example, if you're a blues guitar player, what makes B.B. King different to Buddy Guy? What do they do that's differently? And then you're like, okay, well, if I want to be a really original blues guitar player, what do I have to do to make my sound unique to either of those people? What can I borrow and how can I change it to make it my own? So it's kind of like, you know, those are the kinds of things that I think are good to ask yourself if you're trying to build a unique language in anything. Like it could be, you know, art, music, fashion, whatever, you know. Yeah, because it's almost like, you know, and extending on from that, it's like it is also good to think about what people are missing from their lives and you know, what you can bring them and what makes a difference to their lives. Like, you know, I think that is something that's worth asking, because, you know, it's not about, you know, how can I make money? It's like, how can I improve people's lives and bring them something that they don't already have, you know? Yeah.
That is lovely. And that's exactly what I get from you. It's the truth. I will tell you that you are very clearly an amalgam of the culture you've grown up around, where you were born, where you've traveled, what you've seen. But there's that feeling you mentioned, you know, arpeggios. It is a huge part of what you do, Oliver. And I imagine the speed of life in Australia or in Bali or in the Middle East or in Europe or even sometimes in New York all really, really affect every bit and piece of you, because you have the DNA and then you have the amalgam of life, the living of life. It comes out in the Oliver Chang soup, right?
Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like I think growing up in Asia, like in a lot of my very young formative years, really did influence you know, that kind of that kind of approach, just because like I kind of missed out on the entire 80s kind of like musical sort of world. Like, you know, like, yeah, my first album was Madonna, but Lucky Star, but you know, I was in Bangladesh. There was no radio, there was no Western radio, there was no Western TV. I think we had one VHS cassette that had Elton John, I'm Still Standing on it, and Boy George, Karma Chameleon. And that for 3 years, for example, when I was, you know, 8 years old to like to 8 to 10, 8 to 11, I was like, they're the almost the, I mean, apart from like school discos, they were the only kind of you know, and a few cassette tapes. They were the only like music videos I ever saw, but I only had like 4 tapes. It was like Genesis, Madonna, uh, I can't really, like, maybe 2 Madonna albums, a Genesis album, and maybe like a and my dad listened to Bob Marley and Lionel Richie, and
Wow.
that's kind of all I had. The rest was just like incredible like Bangladeshi Bhangra music and Bhangra beat, and like that's what I would hear, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, growing up as a kid, and the same thing in Bali, like I, you know, yes, you know, you would buy a cassette or, you know, later on a CD from a store, but you know, you generally just hear Balinese music everywhere because, you know, there wasn't you know, like mass broadcasting available really in those days. So yeah, it was just really interesting to be free of the kind of opulence of the 80s, you know, growing up around that, and sort of like becoming accustomed to that idea of, you know, commerce and music being related in such a way. But then, you know, you become a professional musician, then realizing that you need to make money from music as well. So that's another story. Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine that story is pretty complex too, because once you went to New York and then you start licensing music and things are happening, and then people are paying attention, and there's this sort of expectation. You've had a success that I didn't have. I was a professional drummer, but I was a studio guy. I wasn't going anywhere, and I wasn't, and I wanted to. I wanted to be famous and wealthy and all those things.
Sure.
But the thing that I found, and I think the reason I have embraced your sound and what you bring, is because I see what I desire in you, meaning a slowed down life and a life of expression and joy and simplicity. And the other day, in fact, maybe it was yesterday, you posted on one of your maybe Instagram something with a parrot on a telephone wire, and I thought, how, first of all, I've never seen that in my life, because I don't live in a tropical environment, right?
Sure.
But I just love what the image says, and I love how when I saw this is true. I didn't know it was your page at first that I was leafing through. I thought it was just, you know, somebody I follow, and I saw that photo, and the very first thing I thought as I watched that bird was, oh, that reminds me of Oliver. And then sure enough, it's your page. And that really, you see, it connects all the feeling of animal feelings and right, and the fancy feelings and the highs and all the things you do. It just, I know I keep coming around to this and circling around to this, but I can't get over the fact that it is so singular.
Oh, thanks. That's really comforting to hear, because often I get very overwhelmed with like a lot of the projects that I'm working on, and you know, it's kind of like, you know, I get bogged down with doing too many things, and it's kind of it's nice to hear that, you know, it seems to be like kind of like presenting itself as a singular thing, because it doesn't feel like that a lot of the time, but I'm working on it.
Well, it sounds like it. I don't even know how it happens. I feel like there's a thumbprint in there. I guess it's just really obvious to me. You know, I discovered you actually because of the Pacifico beer commercial.
Oh yeah.
That you know, you licensed you know, Open Season. And how did that come about? How did the highs sort of fall into this place of being desired and coveted, and then ultimately ending up on, you know, movie soundtracks?
Sure. I think it was a combination of planets aligning. You know, Jack and I had both moved to New York as composers for quite a reputable music production company, and we had this kind of bizarre. We had already started a band, and we had this sort of bizarre kind of sort of double-edged problem and opportunity. The problem was, you know, we were working full time, and we were working very hard, and it was very intense. So So we didn't have much time to finish our record. Luckily,
Uh-huh.
we had already finished an EP and we're halfway through a record. The good thing about it was we weren't just like two like musicians moving to New York to try to make it. We were like in very privileged positions with very, you know, well-paid jobs and, you know, like a very kind of comfortable lifestyle, and had the luxury to kind of like, take our time with, finishing a record, doing the right shows, choosing the right managers, choosing the right labels, choosing the right, team and partners in our journey. And also like it was a timing thing in terms of uh, style. Like that was the sort of, it was in the midst of the folk explosion and the beginning of the dream pop
Right.
sort of like thing. And we
Yeah.
kind of fit into both of those genres. And, and we're also kind of unusual because we were Aussies in, doing that style of music in New York, which I think was kind of a bit unusual. There are a lot of DJs and, like rockers in Aussies in New York, but not many, uh, folk pop, dream pop people. So I think it was, and also we were kind of like musically, I think we were offering something a little bit different to everyone else because of the mix of those genres, but also because we had quite a strong kind of vibe we were standing by, which was just very kind of welcoming and warm, and we used to sort of ask ourselves, is this a warm bath? Is this a warm bath? When we were thinking about a sound or a production idea or a live show, or it was like, does it feel like a warm bath? Yes or no? If it
Yeah.
does, it's right. If it doesn't, it's wrong. So that was kind of like what we were always thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, the chorus of boxing is a warm bath.
Yeah.
That is one of the most lush.
Yeah, it's
I
beautiful.
don't know if you've ever seen that video, but right after we saw you a couple years ago, I was at the time, I admit, I was very obsessed. I was one of the big fanboys, and there was a video I had actually created when I drove home, and I was driving through my driveway and all that snow, and I don't know if you remember that.
I remember that video. Yeah. It
But
really suited the song.
yeah, absolutely. And it just fitted the timing, even the timing of the driveway, the length was just perfect. And I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. How does that come out of you when you have hidden inside of you the ability to create something like Techno Chicken? These sort of sillier aspects of you. How do you sort of accommodate the character of that? Because you literally are a man of a lot of styles.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because in my mind, I just like, I went through a really long stage of just doing kind of very kind of like angular electronic music, like very kind of like punchy kind of, I entered my kind of musical production journey being obsessed with like Aphex Twin and Ortega and like all the godfathers of electronic music. But so that really influenced me. But then thinking back, that they also had this duality that I kind of really respected. It was like, it was kind of like the left brain, the right brain, like the male, the female, the kind of like, the kind of like aggressive and fierce, and the beautiful and kind, and it's kind of like that they had like this duality that I always like loved, and I always kind of was wary about, we live in an age where you can make any style of music, any kind of, any genre, and mix it all up. But I was always very kind of like dead set on either on either one of these things, the kind of angular and technical and aggressive, or like, wild and fun, and then the really beautiful and loving and kind of, sort of generous kind of ethereal style of music. So I was only ever really interested in those two things. Like I wasn't really interested in anything in between.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, you know, I guess manifesting itself with Chicken Techno, or like my earlier band Theater Disco, or, you know, the band Jungle Feelings that I've started with Rainus now, versus the, you know, the hi-his style, the Animal Feelings, like, you know, ethereal modern classical ambient style of music, the, you know, and then Fancy Feelings is kind of like a, I guess, a mixture of those two things too. But it's you know, I guess it's yeah, I mean, you know, like, so while it might seem like I'm all over the shop, I'm actually just really interested in those two things. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think you're all over. I think it's
No, no,
actually
no.
quite.
I feel like I'm all over.
Yeah. No, I think it's
Yeah.
quite clear to me. And I mean, I hope this isn't offensive. Daft Punk
Mm,
is a
mm.
band that, well, they were
Yeah. Yeah,
sadly
yeah. Yeah.
a group that did that sort of thing, that was
Yeah.
capable of doing the high pressure house all the
Mhm.
way to the over the top orchestral
Mm.
bombast.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I mean, that Tron soundtrack is
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
lights
yeah.
out, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
Something I've been wanting to ask you, and I know we're limited on time, so I'll keep it short. But
That's all good. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I notice you seem to be a significant world traveler.
Yeah.
And how was that seed planted? Was your family constantly on the move? You know, where's the restlessness come from?
Yeah, yeah. So when I was 8 years old, I moved with my mum to Bali, and we were actually on our way to join my dad, who was in Bangladesh, who was working as an accountant at an aid organization.
Mhm.
And you know, we were like, you know, we spent a lot of time in Bali. Then we went to Bangladesh for 3 years. Then my mum and dad split up when my mum took us to Bangkok for 2 years. Then I went to Pakistan for 6 months.
Wow.
And, you know, to hang out with my dad because I got expelled from Bangkok. Then I went from Pakistan to Singapore to boarding school. And I guess just because from a very young age, I've always been moving every few years. I kind of always was comfortable with that. And it's a weird psychological thing because, you know, it was very painful, like leaving friends and, you know, never never seeing them again. But there was also this kind of freshness to the idea of just leaving and starting again
Yeah.
somewhere. That, you know, that has become a bit tiring, and I did have a long break from that in my 20s because I had a child, and like I needed to stay in Australia to raise my child. And you know, that kind of centered me and that kind of anchored me. But then after he was kind of old enough to, you know, and you know, to sort of hang out, you know, like I guess he didn't want to come with me to New York.
Okay.
So, you know, and so I guess after that I was just like really happy to start traveling again. And spending time in New York is almost like living in 5 different countries at the same time as well.
Correct. That's
But
true.
you know, so that was why it was kind of like the perfect city for me. Like I never forget, like sort of every day I'd be driving back from the studio in Soho, riding back on my bike, going through Chinatown, and like Chinatown is so vast there. It's just like, wow, I'm actually in Hong Kong. Like,
Yeah.
or, you know, like the smells and this, you know, everything, you know, and that feeling of just like moving through like countries within a city is just so, I found it so amazing. But yeah, but then, you know, like then I started traveling again, and you know, and I just always feel like, you know, there are parts of me that I don't actually have to face if I'm always traveling, which is something that I've got to deal with.
You
Yeah,
know, but thank you for sharing that, because
yeah,
I know that actually has to be tough. And obviously, I didn't want to, you know, ask you about your personal life, that sort of thing. It's
yeah,
not,
yeah.
you know, it's not for public
Sure,
comment.
sure. Yeah.
But I understand that. I myself,
Mm.
I've lived in 47 different addresses in my life. 47.
Wow. Wow,
And
that's a lot.
that's
Yeah.
and that's a lot. And it's actually
Yeah.
absurd, but partially by my own choosing, because I recognize that in you as well.
Mm,
There's a desire to adapt. It's almost like
mm,
forcing yourself to step into a new environment says,
mm.
can I handle this? You know,
Yeah, yeah,
and by the way, look at me
yeah,
handle this. I'm going to handle this.
yeah.
And what's fascinating about you is you write a piece
Mm.
of music that feels like the environment you're in.
Yeah, yeah, right, yeah, right, yeah, 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 that's true. And, like, I guess, more and more, I'm becoming more and more interested in live recordings of music that is created in a location. So,
Yes.
I've just been on this trip up north, filming and recording a bunch of piano pieces, and I really, for the first time, really, really, really noticed how being in a natural setting with its own lighting and sounds of wildlife, and that's a big, big thing, or kind of running water, or what the wind is doing, or what the waves are doing, how that influences the kind of music you write. Because when you're in the natural world, um, the natural world has sound in it, and that sound needs to be part of the arrangement, and there needs to be space in the piece of music that you're writing for that
Mm.
sound. So it's just really interesting, thinking about a lot of a lot of those things, and actually, like, writing. Like, I was quite surprised that, especially this one piece of music that I wrote up on a hill in the hinterland of Byron, um, where the birds and insects were just humming so loudly. If I played anything slightly complex, it didn't make any sense, because I knew I was recording this, and I knew that the recording would need to sound engaging. So, I just had to make, the arrangement of the piece of music I was writing very, very slow, drawn out, and spacious, to allow the sounds of a million voices of wildlife to kind of be part of the piece of music. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah,
It's
yeah. Yeah.
no, it's amazing. I
Yeah.
have been lost in it. The thing that I've noticed is the animals and the wildlife and what's going on in the background. Those are your lyrics.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Like, I kind of feel like especially with birds, but also frogs and crickets, but
Mhm.
particularly birds, it's kind of like, I kind of feel like we're humans, we're animals, we're living on this natural planet, and we're kind of destroying it. But it's kind of, and I kind of feel like, humans have so much to say. I get so sick of people talking and singing about their problems. It's like, I kind of feel like it's time that, animals, got to say something too. That's why I like birds. That's why I like birds a lot. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's wonderful. But so before we go, I have two
yeah,
questions I want to ask you.
sure,
Could you break down a little bit more about the differences between the projects, the feeling projects? Can you tell me a little bit
sure,
more what they mean to you and
sure,
what we should be interpreting it as?
sure, absolutely. So Animal Feelings is electronic music that I make with modern classical sounds. It's kind of like, mostly piano music, but I also like working with other modern classical sounds. Like, my next album has a lot of operatic vocals in it. I also love using flute and clarinet and French horn and other brass instruments. That's Animal Feelings. Fancy Feelings is a disco pop project, very particularly disco pop, that I have with my friend Zach Colwell. He's in a
Yeah.
band called Fancy Colors, and so you have Fancy Colors, Animal Feelings, make Fancy Feelings.
Awesome.
That's just like a really fun thing that we do, when we have the urge to make something fun and flippant. Jungle Feelings is more of a tribal techno project that I have with Latvian producer Reinas Asmanis, and he's like really really amazing young producer, very talented. And you know, we were touring a lot in New York and Bali and Tulum and making dance music, and we just wanted to, you know, make something that was more live, you know, than that we could play from a DJ booth, but had live instruments in it. And so that's what Jungle Feelings is. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. So before we go, what is next on the horizon for you? What are you doing? What are you releasing? What's, you know, what's coming up that I can tell our listeners?
So this Friday, tomorrow,
good.
we're releasing a new Fancy Feeling single called Party Forever. And it's kind of like a it's a piss take on humans who don't think that humans have an effect on the planet that we live in, but it's kind of like a sarcastic disco pop song. And then monthly for the rest of this year, we're releasing Jungle Feelings singles every month. I think it's the third Friday of every month. And also every month I'm also releasing either an Animal Feelings single or an Animal Feelings EP or an Animal Feelings album. I'm writing a crap load of music. So I'm releasing music almost every 2 weeks. Actually more than every 2 weeks. I'm releasing music about every 2 weeks, give or take a week. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. I want people to buy it, you know.
Thanks so much, Rob. So do I.
Yeah. No, I love it. Okay, so last question. This is a silly, simple question,
sure.
but everybody asks this, so I have to. Yeah. At your funeral.
Yeah.
What do you hope they say about you?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I guess I hope they say that. I hope that people think that I improved their lives a little with my music. Yeah. That would be everything, because that's, you know, I think as humans that's all we can do, right? We can try and, you know, help to improve each other's lives and also, you know the state of the planet that we live in, you know. Like I think that's kind of the best way to kind of you know, approach life, because if everyone does that, then everyone's lives would be better. Yeah.
Oh man, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I've had so much fun. I wish I could spend time with you. I wish I could play drums for you. I'm telling you, I'm one of those guys. If you ever come back into town, I'm going to have a pair of drumsticks tucked in my back pocket, ready to play. Like, please let me do this. But I really
hope to be back there one day. We should try and do something. Like I'm actually like I'm really excited to kind of expand the project of a piano in wild nature. Like I love that idea. That's what I was doing up north, and I want to do it in the desert. I want to do it all over Australia. I'm gonna kind of talk about, you know, funding from brands. You know, like I'm talking to a few different brands about helping me fund this thing. But it's kind of like I just want to travel the world and see like beautiful, like I want to go to the Cascades in Seattle and play piano on top of like, well, a cascade is, and write a record. Why not? And film it, you know, have a film crew. Just, that's the kind of thing I want to do. I really just want to celebrate the natural world we live in and kind of, and put it, you know, into a spotlight, you know, all these natural wonders of the world that, you know, people, you know, might have heard about and think about, and, you know, but, you know, this whole pandemic has really sort of made me realize that there's so much more to the world than just big cities and you know, and you know, playing music and, you know, just like, you know, lifestyle oriented things. Like, you know, that there's so many parts of the world that are so exquisitely beautiful, and I'd love to kind of like bring my piano to them and you know, make records and share these places through my music and through imagery with the piano, with the rest of the world. Yeah, be really nice. Yeah.
Your purpose is beautiful, my friend. You have a passion.
Thanks, man.
I so admire it and appreciate it. So thank you so
Ah,
much for giving me time
Thank
today.
you so much, Rob. Yeah, thanks for having me. All right, have a
Yeah.
great day. Yeah,
You too. Be safe, and we'll see you soon.
see you soon. Bye.
Bye bye.